Dude, what are these cards?
What happened to Sora's voice?
Where do I even go?
Why can't I just mash X, bro?
Now my cards are shiny?
Where's my pizza? I ordered it like 2 hours ago.
If any of these are questions you've asked yourself while playing Chain of Memories, you're not alone. The aim of this guide is to answer some of these questions and teach you how both titles work. Yeah, both. Chain of Memories originally released on the Game Boy Advance in 2004, while the remake, Chain of Memories, released on PS2 in 2007, then later again as part of the HD collections. The titles are pretty similar in most cases, but I'll point out when each tip might be different for each game. So alright, let's get on with the guide. Here are some timestamps for each section, so if you're having trouble with a specific bit of the game, feel free to skip to it, or just keep watching. Who knows, maybe you'll learn something new. If you didn't already know from the opening scenes, Chain of Memories is about cards. Cards rule everything in the castle, be it opening doors, casting magic, or even just swinging the Keyblade. This first section will be all about getting around the worlds and progressing. Using a world card will create that world for you to explore. You just get these throughout the story, so don't worry about running out or anything. However, piece of advice: leave Wonderland until later. It can be pretty difficult when you're just starting out. Every world you reach has a map you can open from the main menu, and your goal is to reach these exclamation marks. The path to these is segmented off in rooms, which you open by using map cards, which you get by defeating Heartless. The doors to these rooms all have requirements for cards you use to open them. For example, this door will open for any card that has a value of 5 or higher. Every map card will affect the room you create in different ways, like Sleeping Darkness making all Heartless immobile while on the field, or white rooms making only white mushrooms appear. Some doors also require a specific key card denoted in yellow. These are generally the story doors within worlds, and most of the time you'll need to visit all 3 to complete the world: the key to beginnings, the key to guidance, and the key to truth, and you'll get each key after using the previous one. However, there is one special room in each world that requires a different key card you won't get by simply using a previous key door: the key to rewards, which house special rewards on each floor. These drop randomly by defeating enemies while on the 7th floor or above, so if you're not that far into the game yet, you can just ignore these doors. 2 very important map cards are bounty cards and Moogle Room cards. There are a few types of bounty cards. They open rooms and spawn treasure chests in them. Every world has an exclusive card or slate you can unlock by opening a chest in a bounty room, and some even have 2, so using 2 of these in every world to make sure you get everything is a good idea. Moogle Room cards open up rooms that have a Moogle in them, who allow you to buy combat card packs with Moogle points. I'll talk more about Moogles later, but know that they're great for strengthening your deck. There are also 2 more important map cards exclusive to the remake versions: Roulette Rooms and Random Jokers. If you're playing on GBA, I'm sorry, but you'll have to watch in disdain wishing you had these. Roulette Rooms allow enemies to sometimes drop roulette bonuses, where, after a battle, you get to pick what map card you gain from a roulette. The roulettes aren't that fast, so essentially you get to pick what map card you want for free. This can help you get a specific value for a key requirement on a door, or to nab important cards like Moogle Rooms and bounties. Just remember to always grab another roulette room with it so you never run out of them. And finally, Random Jokers. These will fill any card requirement for any door for any color, except yellow. Sadly, you can't just skip to a boss of the world with these, but they do drop randomly from enemies, and they become rarer as your difficulty increases, so hope you get some, and make sure you save some to get past the obnoxiously high values later on in the game. So now, since you'll need to defeat Heartless to get all these map cards to get through the castle, how about we get into how combat works? This section will be all about how cards work in the context of battle. Most of this stuff is explained in the tutorial, but who pays attention to those? You should. Let's take a look at the cards used in combat. Every card has a type: attack cards, magic cards, item cards, and enemy cards, each of which do different things. Each of these also have a value assigned to them, ranging from 0 to 9. This value is what determines whether you get to play the card or not. If there's currently no cards in play, any value can be played. However, this changes if there's an enemy's card in play. If the card you play is a lower value than the enemy's card, the enemy's attack will continue and you've essentially wasted that card. If the card you play has an equal value to the enemy's card, you'll card break them, which cancels their attack and stuns them for a short period of time. If the card you play has a higher value than the enemy's card, you'll card break them, and also your attack will begin. This is the basis of any battle, and you'll find yourself getting card breaks and also card broken very often. It's very important to understand this and pay attention to what cards are on screen. On the topic of card breaks, you should definitely know about the importance of zeros. Cards with a value of 0 are special. They can break any value, but they can also be broken by any value. That means 0 cards are your best bet at being defensive, since they'll cancel any enemy's attacks, but they're also really bad to use on offense because they'll likely get broken and you'll eat some damage. Keep this in mind when fighting enemies that throw out threatening attacks, and use them to avoid taking unnecessary damage. So what happens when you run out of cards to play? Well, that's what your reload is for. Filling it up by holding your attack button on it will reload your deck, but every time you do it, the time you have to hold it increases. However, the bar does keep its progress, so you can fill it partially in preparation. Keep this in mind, and remember that you usually want to reload before you're completely out of cards. Next up is stocking cards, and by extension, Sleights. By pressing triangle on Xbox, Y on the PlayStation, or L and R together for GBA, you stock a card, putting it in the top left of the screen. You can stock up to 3 cards, then play them all at once. All their values are added together, and this can result in a really high value and a difficult to break attack. Certain combinations of stocked cards will also result in Sleights, or special attacks. For example, 3 Blizzards stocked together will become a Blizzaga, or 3 attack cards of the same type totaling 20 to 23 will become Stun Impact. Remember that stocking cards, whether they create a Sleight or not, will destroy the first card stocked. You'll still get it back after the battle, but you won't be able to reload it without the use of certain other cards. You can check what Sleights you have and what they require in your status screen. Make sure you learn how to use these, you'll definitely be glad you did. I'll talk more about specific Sleights later on. But for now, one last combat basic: enemy cards. Earlier I talked about different types of cards you use in combat, and this is also one of them, but they work a little differently. First off, they're not in the same menu as your other cards. To swap over to the enemy card menu, you have to hit select on GBA, PS2 or PS3, or this big ass square on PS4, or whatever the hell this is called on Xbox. Second, they don't have a value assigned to them. This is because enemy cards act as temporary abilities or buffs. For example, the Shadow enemy card grants Sora the ability Incrementor, which raises the value of all cards played by 1 while active, making it harder for enemies to card break you. However, this bonus runs out once you've reloaded twice. Every enemy card is different, so be sure to check out what each one does in the journal for a full description. Alright, now that you know the combat basics, how about we move on to something that'll inevitably happen as you play this game. Whenever you defeat an enemy, multicolored jewels pop out of them. This is your EXP, and collecting enough will reward you with a level up at the end of the battle. You'll have 3 options: an HP boost, a CP boost, and a Slate. While it may seem easy enough to just cycle through them every level for balance, Slates aren't unlocked at every level, only at every 5. So a good way to ensure you're always caught up is to go in this cycle instead. Slate, CP, 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 HP. CP is definitely more important than HP is, since it determines how much you can cram into your deck, but HP shouldn't be neglected, in the event you get hit by strong attacks. If you're already past the beginning of the game and haven't really been thinking about your level bonuses, don't worry, you can still adopt this cycle. Just make sure you're caught up with Slates, then pick CP more often than HP. Now, let's move on to what is probably a very confusing bit of the game to some people. When you first see this menu, it definitely seems like a lot to take in, but when you break it down, it's pretty simple. The menu looks different for the original and the remakes, but it has the same general gist. You have a menu to add cards to your deck, and you have a menu to delete cards from your deck. You can also move cards around, and in the remakes, you can remove empty spaces from the middle of your deck. When you first start the game, you have a deck that looks like this. This deck is fine, kinda. Okay, it's not great. Your highest value is a 7, and your 0 is in the middle of your deck, and there's no damage dealing magic in here either. You could try increasing your values and using your attack cards in proper orders to get the most damage out of them, but it won't work for very long. You'll still get card broken a lot by enemies with higher values, and while you're shuffling for your cures, dealing damage, try to cure it off, and then get card broken and even more damage. This game can be brutal, if your deck looks like this. Instead, you want it to look like this. Sleights set up to be used immediately, and every slate is followed up by another. Since they're usually difficult to break when they have high values, Sleights will almost always do what they're supposed to, deal damage. If you remembered what I said before and looked through your slates, you're probably wondering which slates you should use for damage, since there are so many, and the list just gets longer as the game goes on. Now, this is where the two versions of the game might be a little different. I'll go over great slates in each version, and later on I'll let you know how to get the cards you need for them efficiently. However, don't feel like these are the only slates you can use. Experiment and see what you find fun. The original Chain of Memories has some very strong slates, the best of which generally cover wide areas. Among these are the elemental versions of Strike Raid, Blizzard Raid, and Fire Raid. Because of how this game's dimensions are handled, these attacks generally hit almost anything on screen, provided you have your back to a wall and are in line with the centermost enemies. This makes them really good for dealing with mob fights and even most bosses, especially when coupled with the right enemy cards. These slates are also really easy to obtain, accessible starting at the second floor. Blizzard Raid from a bounty in Olympus Coliseum, and Fire Raid from a bounty in Monstro. The requirements for the slates are pretty simple, just a single of the base magic and 2 other Keyblade cards. Using a blue Rhapsody or a red Nocturne enemy card along with these slates will do massive damage to anything in your path. However, if you want to get even simpler, Blizzaga and Firaga do the job really well too. Just 3 of the same magic cards. Blizzaga has a bit of deploying time, but once it's done it reaches a pretty wide radius that does very good damage. Firaga does good single target damage, but you need to remember that it travels upwards after a bit if you're locked onto something. Cast while close up to reduce your chance of missing. These slates will be enough to carry you through a very large portion of the game, but in case you get tired of seeing the same few attacks, here are some others that are still really good. If you ever felt like having someone else do your work for you, you're in luck, cause Cloud absolutely destroys things in this game. With Omnislash he does immense damage, but his CP cost is really high, and because of that you might only have a few of his cards. But feel free to use him when you can, cause it feels so good to hear. You can pair this up with a Crescendo enemy card to make Cloud even stronger, at the cost of not being able to use magic cards like Cure or Blizzard before you reload to get rid of the effect. And last up, Sonic Blade. You get this at level 22, as long as you've been caught up with slates. This has Sora slide across the field striking anything in his way, and you can steer it up and down. Pressing A during each slide will cause Sora to switch directions and start another slide, until the finisher. This can do pretty solid neutral damage, meaning it hits through shields like the large body's front side or the defender. However, it has a more complicated requirement than the previous slates, needing 3 different attack cards, which total 20 to 23. Because of this requirement though, the slate is pretty difficult to break, even for bosses, but if you're fighting a single target, be sure to try to hit them as quickly as possible to reduce the risk of getting broken. Remember with this slate, along with any other slate that uses attack cards, the types you use don't affect how much damage it does. You can use an Ultima Weapon, One-Winged Angel, and Oblivion to make a Sonic Blade, and it would do the same damage as one made with a Kingdom Key, Lady Luck, and Olympia. Up next is the Remake. Recom is pretty generous. Right at the beginning, it gives you the tools you need to bend the game over backwards and snap it in half. Firaga and Blizzaga. I'm not exaggerating, these slates are so immensely powerful that the developers gave almost every single boss resistance to them because they're so strong. And even that isn't enough to stop them from just deleting things. A deck full of these, a few red Nocturnes, and blue Rhapsodies will destroy virtually any enemy. Blizzaga is best for clearing waves of enemies extremely quickly, and Firaga is best for just straight up damage. If an enemy absorbs one because of their element, just use the opposite, or in the event that they absorb both, you can always just run. I'm serious, it's a much better use of your time to just flee from battles with enemies that absorb both, and no bosses can absorb both. A deck full of these 2 slates is suitable for almost any situation, and can carry you through the entire game. If you think you'll get bored of spamming the same 2 slates over and over, there are a few more that are effective, but take a little bit more effort to set up and usually do a little bit less damage. The first one is Sonic Blade. If you've been following the level up route I've detailed before, you'll unlock this slate at level 27. It has a more complicated requirement than the two prior, needing 3 different attack cards which total from 20 to 23. If you've ever heard anybody talk about this game, you've probably heard the tales of how good Sonic Blade is. Because it naturally has a high value, it's difficult to break, and because it hits so quickly, enemies usually can't even play a card to attempt to break it until the attack is over. You can even combo it with Jafar Genie's attack bracer to make it literally impossible to break. It's very strong, but does virtually nothing to airborne enemies, and can be pretty expensive in terms of CP depending on what cards you use to make it. You might also drop the combo if you mistime your button presses, since doing so while there's no prompt on screen will cancel the attack, so pay attention. Next one up is Lethal Frame, unlocked at level 32. You might have heard of this one as well. This one has simpler requirements, just a stop and 2 attack cards, no total requirement. It stops an enemy, then slashes them multiple times for a lot of damage. Because you can have this slate at any value, it can be somewhat easier to set up in a deck, but you'll also need a stop card for each cast of it. A smart thing to do would be to make the attack cards that you use for this slate end up making Sonic Blade, so that you'll still have Sleights once your stop cards are gone. The last one I'll be talking about is Tornado, unlocked at level 37. It's Arrow, Gravity, and any summon, so it can be pretty costly on CP. This one's pretty great for mob fights, especially versus enemies that are immune to fire or blizzard, or both. It lasts long to let you catch all the enemies on screen with it, then drops them all for massive damage. It doesn't work that great on bosses though, so watch out and don't bring it in when you know there will be one. But it works pretty well to kill anything without a huge amount of HP. Now that you know which slates will be useful, it's time to add some support to your deck. You'll definitely need heals in the event that you get hit. Cure is the best choice, preferably with a decently high value. Since these can be pretty expensive, I would start with 2 and add maybe 1 extra for every 3 floors you go up, and avoid stocking them unless absolutely necessary. You don't want to lose them and end up without any heals. Next is an item card or 2, which makes sure that you can have cards when you need them. This isn't very necessary at the beginning of the game, but as your deck grows, the animation for reloading gets longer and longer, and you might end up eating damage because of it. Some item cards even allow you to reload lost cards, like those destroyed by stalking. Keep this in mind when you find that 1 round of Sleights just isn't enough. The Sleights you're using should influence what enemy cards you decide to bring in, if any. You can put them anywhere in your deck, but remember if you have multiple, they'll show up in that order in battle. And finally, some zeros at the back to break attacks that are really threatening. What type of card they are doesn't matter too much, but you don't really want long-lasting attacks like summons, and you'll want to save CP for other parts of your deck, so Zero Kingdom Keys are your best bet. If you're playing the remakes, remember hitting up on the D-pad will quickly shuffle you to the reload card, and then you can shuffle once to the left and play your zero. Exclusive to the remakes deck menu is the shortcut, which allows you to pick a card in your deck to instantly shuffle to by pressing down on the D-pad. I'd probably shortcut your Cure so that you can stock it in emergencies, or try to break a lower value to get some heals out of it. But you can shortcut wherever you want. Now that you know what you want your deck to look like, you're probably wondering how to get all these cards. It's not very difficult, but it can take some time. For most of the cards I mentioned, farming them near the beginning of the game is much easier than doing so later in the game, and you'll see why in a bit. The best way to get cards for your deck is by visiting a Moogle, which can only be done in Moogle rooms. Like I've said before, Moogles allow you to buy card packs with Moogle points. This is an amazing way to strengthen your deck, since every pack has 5 cards in it, and every Moogle room will give you a free attack card pack as well. The packs range from 100 points to 500 points, depending on what type you're buying and how high you are in the castle. There are attack packs, magic packs, and item packs, and each one has several tiers you can buy from, unlocked as you go higher. If you want to use the slates I mentioned, here's where you'll most likely find the cards you need for them. As you can see, some of these cards overlap in specific tiers, and that's why farming for them as early as you can works best. The more cards you unlock, the more likely it is that you'll get cards you don't want in your card packs. So how do you get these Moogle points to buy these card packs anyway? Well, one way is to sell your cards to the Moogle. Obviously this isn't very efficient and you're limiting your deck's options by doing this, so there's gotta be a better way, and luckily there is. Just interact with the environment, be it by hitting things, jumping on them, or that's kind of it. These treasure spots have a chance of spitting out HP prizes, Moogle points, or even combat cards. If you're playing the GBA version, this is great, because every time you enter a room, all the spots get reset and you can nab more out of them. Swapping between 2 rooms will allow you to infinitely farm points and cards, and the more interactions in the room, the more likely you'll be getting what you want. Sadly, in the remakes, this method was kinda nerfed, and you can only interact with each treasure spot once. You'll need to make a new room to be able to extract that Moogle juice again. Thankfully, there's another method that's only in the remakes, which can certainly speed up how fast you get Moogle points. Just head to Agrabah, get into some fights, and hope you get Aladdin to drop. Using him to hit enemies will cause them to drop Moogle points, and getting a full triple slate with him will make the orbs worth even more. Using a meeting ground map card can make this method a little easier, especially when mixing it in with the treasure spots from earlier. For both versions though, remember that going into a battle will despawn anything that dropped from a treasure spot, so be sure to either grab them before starting a fight, or to clear out the room before you start going for the spots. Sometimes when you're buying cards from Moogles, you'll come across these shiny cards with yellow values. These are premium cards, and you might also get them as a drop after a battle as an upgrade to an attack or magic card in your deck. Premium cards cost less CP to put in your deck than their non-premium counterparts, but as a trade-off they can only be used once per battle, as if they were stocked. These can definitely be useful to fit more Sleights into your deck, especially because when you use them in Sleights, their premium status is ignored. Using them second or third in a Slate won't destroy them, but using them first will, but that would have happened anyway because every first card in a Slate gets destroyed. However, keep in mind that cards you would normally use alone, like Zeros or Cures, will be destroyed if you decide to use them like that. Luckily, item cards that reload stocked cards like High Potions, Mega Ethers, and Elixirs will also reload premium cards. And if you're looking for enemy cards, I'm certain you've noticed that defeating a boss gives you their enemy card. But what about just for basic enemies? Well, this is where farming can get kind of annoying. Enemy cards drop randomly after defeating Heartless. The last enemy that you defeat in battle is the one that has the chance of dropping its card. So if you're looking for a specific one, like the few that I mentioned in the Slate section, make sure you save those enemies for last. The chance isn't very high to begin with, but being in dangerous rooms will double the chances. There's also some RNG manipulation you can do to make farming these easier later on in the game. If you're interested, I'll link the video in the description and in the little eye in the corner. Alright, that's everything about gathering cards. I'm done with all the really important stuff, so to wrap everything up, I'm just gonna rapid fire off some general tips. If you want to make sure an attack will be cast, wait for an enemy to play a card you can card break. The stun will stop them from moving, and also they won't be able to try to card break it until their stun is over. If you're using attack cards to swing the Keyblade and want to optimize your damage, check the journal for stats of each Keyblade type. Different blades do different amounts of damage based on where they are in the combo. This animation is the strike, and this one is the thrust. You can probably figure out which one the finish is. You can stock an item card with other high value cards to reduce the chance of it getting broken. Try to avoid using Donald against enemies that can absorb a certain type of magic. He randomly picks between Fire, Blizzard, Thunder, and Cure, so if he decides to cast the wrong one, he might end up healing them. Goofy is pretty great damage, especially when he spins around. You can steer him in a direction by moving around, so lead him to enemies to destroy them. If you're playing the remake, don't stress too hard about losing your cards to stocking. If your deck becomes small enough, Pluto can come in and dig up your lost cards for you. It's still a much better idea to bring in items that can reload lost cards, but it's nice to have backup. Using gimmick cards in boss fights will give you the upper hand. Not every boss has them, but for the ones that do, it usually stuns them or otherwise makes it much easier to attack them. You probably want to reload before using one to maximize their use. All enemies have a set of cards they can use, just like you do. For example, Shadows can only ever use 1s, while Dark Balls can use 2s, 4s, and 6s. Bosses have their own full decks too, but it's hard to pin down exactly what they are in a single fight, so just be prepared for tougher battles the further on you go. Alright, that's everything. I know this was probably a lot to take in, so if you have any questions, post a comment down below. Hopefully this guide helps you learn how to actually have fun with the game instead of dropping it after a few hours like I see a lot of people do. Thanks for watching, and if you do enjoy this kind of content, let me know by hitting it with a like, and subscribe if you want to see more of what I do. And, you know, maybe, if you guys want me to, I'll make another one of these, focusing on a different part of this game. Alright, See you guys.